Welcome to this session of the CX Exchange. My guest today is Josh Lehman, the Director of the Office of Business and Customer Assurance within the Office of Digital Transformation at the Food and Drug Administration. Josh, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jason. Glad to be here.
Today, we're focusing on what we call the internal customer, if you will, right? For a lot of agencies, there's external, there's internal. Every agency has both. For the internal side, it's really the federal employees. Josh, your customers are FDA employees and potentially contractors and potentially researchers and whomever else works maybe for the FDA or with the FDA. So I'm going to start kind of at the beginning about the approach to customer experience, customer service. What's it look like and how has it evolved over the last few years?
Yeah, no. So actually, it's really exciting. I think the one of the things with the pandemic that really inspired some change with that customer experience is allowing us to have a much stronger foundation of communication and education to our end users. We didn't have those communication channels that existed pre-pandemic where you're able to talk to your friend before and find out what's going on. And so that's one of these things that started really kind of taking off during the pandemic. We had some really significant initiatives that we needed to push through while the programs were really had to do their thing, right? We had a lot of really important work going on through the pandemic, obviously. And so in order to have that balance, we really needed to focus on kind of what the customer was going to be really experiencing, right? And the customer is our employees at this point, and making sure that we're not disrupting them, to be able to focus on their work. And so one of the areas that we kind of focused on is this program that we've established that's called the User Experience Program. And what that did is took some of these initiatives, these enterprise level pushes, and aligned some consistent communication channels, identified stakeholders, major stakeholders, and education paths, and made those really consistent throughout the all of these projects moving forward. And what that wound up doing is actually allowed us to start accelerating how fast we were able to deploy these various tools and capabilities, giving the FDA more abilities to start to run with, and then also getting us into a position that we can, have that consistency so that people have the right expectations on what's coming.
Interesting that you said stronger foundation around communication and education. My experience in working with whether it's the FDA or agencies more broadly, I'll say this is, they usually were pretty good about sending out emails, right? And when we were all in the office having those water cooler conversations, the good managers, the best managers, I walk around to each of my offices and say hello and talk to them and check in. What was missing versus what the pandemic gave us, because we were all out of the office, we couldn't do the walkthrough, there was no water cooler, right? What was the difference? What changed?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, right? So because those dynamics had changed, one of the things that, so you mentioned that we're really good at we're so good at sending out emails. We're really good at that. One of the things though that happens is a lot of people don't read emails, right? They might read emails from their boss or maybe their, some management change, but they're not necessarily reading emails from IT or, for these like more global organizational items, right? So what we actually wound up doing with this user experience, when I talk about communication channels, we've actually started putting in information into channels that already existed that people use, right? So how do we get, one of the things was, how do we get to kind of the supervisors so that they can actually give it to their staff on what information is going to impact them, right? And so by really getting it much more personal and indoctrinated into existing communication channels that people were used to, or that were actually established because of the pandemic, really gave us that kind of ability to start directing people and also getting that feedback loop of, oh, right, because communication goes both ways. That's one thing we need to make sure that it's not just us sending stuff out, but we also need to get that information back on, how this is impacting folks and, make adjustments to make sure that is going smoothly.
I can't agree with you more. Sometimes there's so many times when you send an email to someone, and I always like to send questions, and they'll go like, "What questions do you want to ask?" And you just kind of go, "Oh, they were at the bottom of the email." No one scrolled down to see the below my signature is the questions. Anyways, I feel your pain. And I think establishing those, kind of using those existing channels. And then, and again, I don't want to spend too much time on the pandemic because I think we all are a little tired of it, but
Yeah.
you said, okay, we all had to change the way we work. And that was probably the golden opportunity to start impacting how we communicate, how you communicated with employees. So let's go into that strategy a little bit. What does it look like for those internal? How is it different than maybe the external one, whether it's businesses or citizens? Give me a sense of where you're today and how it works today.
Yeah. So yeah, again, this is something that's especially for the internal areas, right? I think this is something we can probably use a similar approach as we expand to do more external focused stuff. But at least at this point, we're really focusing on kind of making sure that the internal employee has what they need, and that we've really got this kind of framework mapped out well enough that it does it. We kind of look at the Zappos model of making sure the employees have what they need so that they can provide exceptional service for the external customers, right? Is kind of that model. So I think that from where we started to where we are now, we've had things that as far as just some of the change this is like brought, we've had the ability to actually release an enterprise capability, right? I'm not going to mention any specifics, but in 8 months, right? As opposed to previously, it was something that would take something to about 3 to 4 years. Right. So, and again, some of that was because, we had to, but a lot of it had to do with how smoothly things were going, that we didn't have to stop and restart to do that, because we had kind of this constant communication feedback. So, I kind of talked to our team that we really leverage rolling wave planning methodologies, right? So you just start moving forward, you figure out what you don't know, and then you constantly, change. So there's never any way of actually stopping, but you're just adjusting so that you have the least amount of impact across the board.
I'm so happy you brought up the Zappos model. I think so many times people lose sight that what sometimes happens in the private sector can be co-opted, borrowed, stolen, use the word you want, into the federal world too, because there's a lot of similarities. Big companies, big organizations. FDA is not all just in Washington, D.C. I imagine you have employees all over the country. And then you have also employees who are in the field, it's the Food and Drug Administration. So I imagine that's part of this idea is make sure it filters down to employees, again, no matter where they are and where they're working.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And we do have a worldwide footprint, right? And so that's one of those areas that becomes an overall challenge, because too often I think a lot of our stuff is focused just on kind of the DC metro area as far as what the customer is. And that's definitely not the case. Almost a third of our workforce is not in the DC metro area to support that global mission.
The other thing I just want to touch back on is this idea of the constant change, right? The idea of you release an enterprise capability in 8 months, which is, just goes to show you the impact that kind of the new business processes, thinking about the customer, thinking about how it works, and then having that constant feedback. A lot of folks will say, oh, you're using DevSecOps, or you're using Agile, or iterative development. Is that's maybe the technology side of it, but there's also the human side of it. Is that kind of part of this customer experience change that you've been going through?
Yeah. Actually, so part of this framework that we've kind of put in, right, is if you look at any type of project management framework, or whether it's agile or whatever you're going to work through, right, it's there's always a communications plan, right? There's always these areas, and I think too often what was happening previously is that every single project created its own communications plan, created its own support structure. It created its own, right? And so then what winds up happening is, from an end user perspective, you have to know that exists in order to even absorb that service, right? So, so by having this stuff as kind of more as an enterprise capability, hey, it's an enterprise capability, all goes in one place, and all communicated in a very similar fashion, and then your supervisors and everybody have access to things that they get educated on that they can then pull back and share, is really a capability that can go into any of the project management frameworks that any of these projects could be running through.
I imagine also from a customer perspective, that's also helpful for them, because then they're not going, okay, Josh really communicates well, so I know this project from Josh will work well, but this project from Mary or Bill or whoever, Bill has this habit of not communicating until the end, but now we have more standardization, and that's creating the better, in the end, better experience for the customer.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and I think to that, it's not necessarily in anyone's fault. It just is that's what they had to do because that didn't exist, right? And so, and that's exactly what we're trying to do, is just bridge that customer experience as well as the projects. One other thing kind of to that this has started to do is giving us the ability. So we have this kind of regular communication with all of the program leadership, right? And so that's one of these feedback loops. And with that, we actually have all of the project managers for these projects join in on that to have that discussion. And so too often, I think you would have projects that would not necessarily be able to sit in front of like a leadership and hear direct feedback on how that is, that project's like affecting them. And without that direct feedback, it's just amazing to see kind of people walking away with, oh my goodness, this is what I'm, first of all, it gets people excited. It's like, this is what I'm doing, right? I'm really making an impact, right? So you have kind of that from the IT side, but then it also gives that ability to let people know, hey, this is what's going on. This is how it's going to impact us. And you know what? We have this business project, right? That we need to do, right? Congressional, whatever, right? We need to have this done by next week. So because we have that dialogue and that communication, we can essentially say, hey, well, if this feature will help you out, we'll push you up front, or if it's going to be disruptive, we'll move it later, right? So it allows us to be, when I talk about that rolling wave planning, right, that allows us to kind of manage the schedules around kind of what's going to make the most business impact or least business impact, to make sure that the work that FDA does that's really important can get done. IT is just a facilitator, right? So, yeah.
Generally speaking, and again, you've been on this journey for a while, I imagine, but what's the reaction been from your mission areas, from the business side? Were they a little hesitant? Did you have to get, again, a common term we hear a lot is, you got to get some early wins. Did you get some of those early wins to get people on board, or were they ready for it in a sense? Like, how'd you get through that culture change, which is always never the IT, it's always the culture.
Right. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I don't think that you can be successful without those early wins, right? You need to essentially say that you're going to do something and then have it be done. Otherwise, you wind up, oh, it'll get done, right? So I think that you definitely need to have some of those things that are early wins. I think at least in our situation, one of the areas that we wound up having essentially some pretty significant projects that had already kind of gotten started while we hit kind of started this user experience. So when we started speaking with them, they were like, oh, wow, that's really exciting. And, it was in a position that it could actually get, moved out fairly quickly. Now we don't count that one as the 8 month eight month project, but because that actually took some time for us to get to, but it certainly did show that, okay, this is what we're going to do. We did what we said we were going to do, and then listen to your feedback. I think that's the other thing that was really, that has been really powerful, is that, we have staff now that from an IT side, and this is actually, I think, more of a you talked about culture change. I think this is like a real culture change. Is people used to be, when you would get some feedback on, hey, this is too hard to use, right? It would be, well, that's their problem. And now it's like, since we've done this, we actually have these folks that come in that are responsible for these service areas, and they're like, no, give me some more feedback. What are you trying to get done? Let me see how I can actually adjust this to make your life easier. And I think that from a culture standpoint and customer experience, that's phenomenal, right? That's what we want to try to get everyone to be looking out for, is, what's the best thing that we can do, rather than, throwing something out there and then it not being exactly what people need, and they're being frustrated now. So.
Right. I think there's nothing worse than a frustrated customer, because there's that snowball effect that the IT folks are frustrated, the customer's frustrated, the management's frustrated, and then eventually the administrator of the FDA is frustrated, and then it all kind of comes down. We'll use the old house of cards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Josh, one of the reasons why we're talking today is because of one of those big projects you may not have referred to, but it is one of those projects that originally got us on this discussion. It's around the IT help desk kiosks.
Yeah.
And let's talk about what that project is, how it works, how you got to say, okay, this is the reason we're going to move in this direction. Just give us a little bit of background and we'll delve into that customer experience side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have we've had a kiosk, right, for quite some time. We've had it for, probably about 5 or 6 years. We've actually, part of our push has been this new, merging that kiosk with the technology as a virtual kiosk, right? So and these are essentially tools that we use for various support options. So if you kind of look at kind of holistically what FDA offers from a support standpoint, if there's an issue, you would have somewhere where you could call up and somebody could help you over the phone. You could schedule some time with somebody and then they would, work through, getting on your schedule, which always winds up becoming a little problematic. Email, but that's asynchronous, became a little bit more challenging. We recently just launched chat, right? And so that's another one that has a lot of potential there with all the AI stuff. So it's really exciting. And then we had the kiosk, and the challenge with the kiosk, it worked really great for large populated areas. So you can think of what the kiosk concept is like the Apple Genius Bar, right? And so if you have a physical issue with a device, right, or maybe it's not even a physical issue, it's not working, ideally, right? What we'd start to look at is kind of through all those support channels, is there one that might be better for this specific issue? And, for that type of troubleshooting, the kiosks are awesome, right? Because you can hand over your device and, they're able to kind of fix things much faster in that realm, right? That you might not be able to do nearly as fast in any of those other support models. So we wanted to know, like, as I mentioned, we have a worldwide footprint, right? How, we can't put the people all over the various locations that we work. And so one of the things that we partnered with is, with our vendor, is getting this virtual kiosk that allows the ability to, actually walk up, and it's just a box, similar to what you would do. I think now, it's been a while since I've been at an airport, but I think like now you almost have to do this kiosk check-in when you're at the airport, right? And, so in a similar fashion, it gives us the ability to, distribute that capability across a lot more locations, and then still being able to support very similar capabilities that are kind of faster, resolution times for those support areas than we had previously.
So let's delve down just maybe a next level, because if I'm a FDA employee and my computer keeps shutting down every Thursday at 2:00, and it's really frustrating, and I don't know if it's just I hit a box by accident, or it's a cyber thing, meaning somebody, some administrator. I could go to that kiosk and do what? Like how, like walk me through, maybe mine's a bad example, but walk me through an example.
Yeah. So, I guess, some of the things would be, okay, my, because think of something that would be really challenging to do kind of over the phone, right? It would be like my camera isn't working on my video calls, right? That's one of these things that, it could be software, it could be hardware, it could be, and so from a technician standpoint, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to get us to kind of figure out where that actual problem lies. Whereas if you were able to walk up and actually have a technician right there, or from a virtual standpoint, have them right there, and have them be able to kind of do this diagnostic capability over that computer, because it's able to kind of go in and check it out. that's not that all of a sudden you've taken something that might take 45 minutes to go over because you're walking the user through some things or you're remoting in and then you're asking them physical questions to 5 minutes to say, oh yeah, it looks like the hardware's failed and we need to get you either a new computer or new camera, whatever that issue is. So
it's almost like I would take my laptop and plug it into the kiosk,
yeah.
or okay, and
Yeah,
then
yes. Yeah.
the person on the other end, you on the other end, would then say, give me 5 minutes and do your thing, and be like, oh, it's this issue or that issue, or we can't tell, you need to leave it and we need to actually touch it. There's a whole series of
Yeah.
things that can
So
happen.
yeah, so I can go through kind of the general concept of it, right? So we have multiple cables that kind of sit outside of that to plug into various devices, whether it's a phone or a laptop. All of those are starting to come into the same plug, which is awesome. But right now there's still a bunch of different ones. And so you go in, you plug in your device. You go through some steps on the screen, and then all of a sudden, wouldn't be my face, but maybe somebody's face, else's face pops up, and you start the dialogue on what your issue is. They're able to actually get into the machine in a little bit more detail than we're actually able to do when we remote into a machine. So there's more capabilities that they're able to get to through this process, and then through that dialogue. And being able to get through that machine, and maybe even seeing some physical things. So it's like, oh yeah, here's my let me make sure that the cover's not on your camera, right? That could be being able to show that and walk through that. All of a sudden, that entire support model becomes much faster for that issue than maybe you would be able to do just at your desk on the phone.
I appreciate you walking us through that a little bit, because I think folks think kiosk and, oh, I put my thing in, I close the door, and I take my coffee out and I wait. But it's not necessarily the kiosks from the 1950s where you got your food. It's a little different. So I appreciate you kind of walking through it. At the same time, you said that the time to resolution is much faster as well. Did you know that going in, or was that sort of a, oh wow, that's a benefit we weren't expecting?
Yeah, we had so we've always had kind of this desk side support option, right? And that I kind of mentioned that you would be able to go and say, okay, you called the call center, or you put in something in email, and we know we need to send somebody to your desk, right? Because you have this issue, and it's something that we really need to look at physically. I think that the challenge that we had always went with that is that people get busy at work, right? And all of a sudden your boss calls, and I'm telling you, if you have to fix your camera or go meet with your boss, every single time somebody meets with their boss, right? There's no way that your camera, fixing your camera is going to be outweighing your boss, right? So, so what this actually started allowing to do is to kind of really gave people the flexibility of when, hey, I'm going to stop by when I'm going to lunch, or I'm going to go, and so we kind of saw that we anticipated that scheduling issue would go away, and you being able to have kind of that more flexibility. What wound up happening though is that people really liked it, right? And almost liked it better than going to having someone come to them. And because of that, some of it became a little social, right? And so because of that, it really had a lot more popularity than I think we maybe initially anticipated. So that there's that component. The other aspect that we were anticipating, and even with the virtual kiosk, is if there is some type of update that might be much more manual. We're trying to get away from those, but they still exist now and then. This would be something that might be able to deploy on a larger scale, and then if you needed to get a phone flashed or something to that extent, you would be able to just walk up, and maybe we would have a fleet of these and get that service immediately rather than waiting. So it also allows some scalability that we don't necessarily have with this service that people tend to enjoy.
It's I also would guess, if you and I are in the office and I go, oh Josh, I gotta get my computer fixed, I'm gonna run down to the kiosk, and you go, oh, I'll go with you, I'm frustrated by this issue, or I've been meaning to get that. I think that also pops up. So I guess the big question is, do I need an appointment for the kiosk, or can anyone go at any time, or how's that work?
Yeah, yeah. So we actually, it's very timely. We right now it's kind of first come first serve, right? And that's kind of the way it's been for quite some time. We're actually, especially with them, in different locations, and the our main campus is pretty large, right? So if you walk over and there's like a 15-minute wait, that could actually be pretty frustrating. But even for some of the areas that we might use the virtual kiosk for, it would be good to know kind of wait time. So we're actually building that in so that you could actually check and even reserve some time. Say I'm going to be available at this point, and the nice thing about that, because it's kind of the opposite of scheduling, kind of like the way restaurants work, right? If the person's not there, they can still service somebody else that might be in line. But when that person's there, they don't necessarily need to wait, right? You must kind of like the fast pass type of approach to get that service. So that's actually something we're working on right now on deploying is kind of that scheduling aspect, and really giving some folks some insight into kind of how busy things are at the kiosks, and what they could expect walking in.
And of course, if you've ever been to an amusement park and gotten the fast pass, you're not going to have to pay for this 60 or 70 or 100 extra dollars. It's just going to be part of the thing. So
Exactly.
I think your folks will appreciate it. We've talked a little bit about the benefits, but let's talk about the measures. Are there certain metrics you guys are using to say average time it takes to fix the computer is 3 minutes, 12 minutes, 18 minutes, or what other metrics are you using to say, hey, this IT help desk, the virtual version or the in-person one is improving our customer experience?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, there's a couple support channels we have. We tend to have similar measurements for all the support channels, so we can start to compare that. So we have kind of this first touch metric, right? So, Jason walks up, or calls up, whatever, and if we can't fix it right then that's not first touch, right? So first time you interact with us, if we can't fix it, that's something that we want to look at to try to improve. The other area is speed of completion, and the speed of completion, depending on the service, is different depending on what type of support you're getting, right? So as I mentioned, the kiosk actually has, especially with the physical things, challenges and features, it winds up being typically much faster. But there are a couple areas that maybe the chat, again, I think chat is one of these things that's going to be pretty interesting, because it will have essentially the ability for a specific user to maybe start supporting themselves more once we integrate it a little bit tighter with other systems, right? So what we'd expect in kind of the near future is for a user to be able to actually chat something and say, hey, I need this software, and for it to run through the process and push that software to the user, whereas rather than needing to go to the kiosks. And so what we want to try to do is make sure that people are aware of the various capabilities and support channels, and push them to the one that's going to service them the best, that they have available to them. So that's kind of one of the approaches that we're trying to take. And I think one of the other challenges that we wind up having along with this is, especially with physical capabilities within the buildings, is too often we have folks that kind of come into a building once, right? Maybe you have your information on what that building offers, right? And when you're a new employee, maybe you read that. But it's not something that every time you go in the building, you're going to go and say, oh, look at that, there's a new thing that they added, until you need it. So one of the things is, how do we let people know that this even exists, right? And so part of this area is, if we know that you're in the building and that virtual kiosk is around the corner and you may not know about it, and we know that the issue that you're bringing up to us, either through chat or through the phone call, that is going to take 30 minutes here, and there's no line in there, we're going to try to point you over to there and say, hey, can you walk around the corner? We'll be able to service you a lot faster for this type of issue, and get you up and running. So that's one of these things that's always a little tricky to figure out how you get the word out on these capabilities. Too often things are digital and much easier to kind of disseminate, but these physical things are a little trickier.
Actually leads me to two very similar questions. So let me start with maybe the first one, which is around folks coming into the building. We know a lot of us across the government still work remotely. I know at some agencies, they come in twice a week, they come in once a week, they come in once every 2 weeks. How do you guard against the kiosks being really busy on Wednesdays when 80% of the people are in the building, and really not busy on Mondays and Fridays when nobody's in the building? Is there a way to guard against that? Or sometimes it's like the restaurant, you busy time, 6 o'clock on a Friday are going to be 6 o'clock on a Friday. You got to know that going in.
Yeah. I think, and similar to the way that the kind of, I don't know if folks have seen this on Google, right? If you go in and type in a restaurant, right, they'll say this is usually not a busy time, right? Or this is a really busy time, right? I think, setting that expectation on, where those capabilities are, and, kind of where the, demand is, right, is really important, right? Because what would be really frustrating for folks is them coming in thinking, I'm going to do this thing in 5 minutes, and then they're there an hour, right? And so, I that's a really important part, and one of the reasons why we're really kind of pushing to have this capability of letting people know how busy they are currently from their desk before they even leave. So it definitely is a challenge around demand management for that physical capability. The nice thing is that we do have those other support channels that can then kind of drive in and help support and level out that demand.
Right. The kiosks it's not only kiosks. It's just
right.
Kiosks have this added benefit. So if you need to call somebody, or you prefer to call somebody, and there are people, I imagine, who say, I just want to talk to Josh. Can't just Josh help me, versus go to the computer and deal with it. So it's all you're meeting people where they are versus
Yes.
where you want them to be, which is, I think, part of this whole discussion on customer experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really good. Yep.
The other piece of this is and I think is important, is how to get the word out, because again, if you don't know, you don't know. Have there been steps that you've taken to, again, go to those channels that exist that people pay attention to? Have you done specific education training with managers so they can flow that down, or vice versa? Have you done specific education training with the field staff so they can push up the idea that these different avenues exist?
Yeah. So again, because that's definitely a challenging thing. So if folks do have some suggestions, feel free to reach out to me and give them to me. But so certainly we moved forward with the communication channels, right? That we've established through that user experience program that I mentioned earlier. So those existed. It still is a little bit of nobody memorizes the support number for their internet provider, right? You wind up looking it up when you need it. And so I think some of that is to make sure that people kind of have some situational awareness of that thing exists when they need it, versus trying to make it something that they need to memorize and handle when they have work that really needs to be focused on. So, I think that's one of the challenges with, almost any support model, is that you really just need it to be there when you need it, and then kind of out of the way and forgetting it when you don't. And so, that's at least the approach that we've taken. We've made some awareness, right, from kind of the communications and things, not necessarily expecting that people hold on to it. And then when they actually start to engage with maybe their favorite support channel that they have, making sure that they're able to know and direct that capability. So.
You mentioned two kinds of kiosks, right? The virtual one is the if you will, the newer one of the two.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion, or is there a longer term plan? And again, this may be not something yet, but well, maybe I don't want to have to go to a kiosk. I want to do it all from my desk. Can't I just do it software as a service? Can't I just log on and then have Josh, who's my IT help desk person, just take over my computer? Is that part of this
So,
already, or is that something that's coming up in the future?
oh, no, absolutely. And so, I think one of the things that's really interesting is, as we measure those various support channels and their capabilities, the idea is to, if calling it, takes 30 minutes to fix a camera issue, right? And the kiosks are able to do that in 5. How do we get the call down to 10, right? And so one of the big things is throughout all of these, how do we kind of level that off and just figure out what is actually working to provide that overall experience? Because you're absolutely right. I mean, we didn't necessarily have the ability for at some points over the last few years for people to even come in and leverage that capability, right? So we did have to kind of use that virtualization and those capabilities because, so we had a couple support channels cut off. I think that in the future, what we're really looking to is for those kind of virtual services to really kick in and start to help users to do more of what we'll call like a tier 0, right, or maybe tier 0.5, right? Because I think it's interesting, people don't really know where to put chat, especially from an AI chat. That gives us that feedback on because people are able to just kind of self-soothe, right? So if I'm able to deploy a script that we know there's an issue that people sometimes have with this product, if I'm able to put that in there and deploy that, and it cleans that up and then removes it, and then the person's back up and running, there's no interaction that happened with that. I think one of the other things that we have, not to get too far down with chat, but that we've had some challenges with, you talk about kind of metrics, right? And one of the things that we've started looking at is that we're seeing our user base overall just get more educated on how to fix their own technology. I think that was another thing of people working at home, is they didn't have someone to tap onto and say, hey, how do I fix this, and then need to call. They've just gotten better, right? And so the questions that we're getting are more sophisticated. So how do we continue to kind of support that? But regarding the chat stuff, is that now all of a sudden that starts to make our end users much more powerful, right, with these deployments and these capabilities. And how do we start to measure if once, and I guess it's not specific to chat, but chat is one of these things we've seen, is that how do we measure the fact that the user just got better, right? And but we still have this issue, right? And they just know how to solve it, and they're solving it 15 times a week. But it's something from a problem standpoint that we still need to address. So it's interesting, as we start to get more sophisticated users, we need to find better communication channels than just the support model to figure out what's going on and what's wrong with the environment, because the users are sophisticated enough to actually fix it and keep working and not report it. And so it's a really interesting kind of catch-22. It's great that they're stronger, but we start to miss the potential problems that are much larger in the environment without that feedback loop that we traditionally used with the tickets.
I think we've all realized I just need to reboot my computer and then everything works again. I think that's really all those tier 0 folks were just saying, Josh, have you rebooted today? Oh, okay. We don't want to pick on our friends on the help desk. They have a very complicated job, but it always starts with reboot your computer, Josh. A couple of things in the final 5 or 10 minutes that we have together. I want to go back to all of this effort, all this work with the kiosks and understanding users and how it's changed. How have you taken those lessons learned and how are you applying them to future, whether it's efforts around the kiosks or just more broadly, the CX efforts across FDA?
Yeah, no. So this is actually really exciting. Just maybe 6 months ago. Yeah, we'll say 6 months ago, we started integrating that user experience framework to any enterprise project. Right. So previously it was kind of this select items that were like, hey, we really need to enhance our collaboration capabilities. We need to do. So it's kind of really focused on, specific objectives that were for the enterprise. Now I think we've learned enough that what we want to do is make sure that anything that's going out there starts to fall into this, right? Because what winds up happening is even because there's some enterprise capabilities that go out that are not IT, right? Specifically from an IT standpoint. And we want to kind of embrace those and make sure that folks have that same communications and model that we've established, and feedback loop that can be used for any enterprise initiative. And I think I have a longer term kind of push that this would start to just integrate with any of our projects that we're deploying, whether or not it's enterprise or not. There's some little challenges there that we need to work through because that's a lot of information. But the idea is that we really need to make it as simple for our end users to use, for them to use it. Otherwise, they're going to go and say, oh, well, I really use this, and that doesn't exist in this thing that you developed. And well, 90% of the stuff I do, but this is really important to me, and I'm going to miss out on that if that's not included. So,
being in the IT world, we cover a lot of IT. You probably spend in business, digital transformation office, a lot of IT, but there's other user experience and other projects that definitely, they may have a piece of IT, but they're not really IT. And I think that's key to take these experiences and move them down across the entire enterprise. What do you think, generally speaking, is your big lesson learned? What generally speaking, have you really drawn from this effort around, again, whether it's IT kiosks or more generally some of the work your office has been doing?
Yeah, I think one of the things, especially the last few years, that we've kind of it just is too often we always kind of chased best in class, right? And it's almost that interoperability trumps best in class from a user experience standpoint. One of these things that I've kind of been drawn on is that when something just works by what you seem like by accident, right? It's like, oh, I just tried that and it worked. That is just like that's one of the greatest feelings from a using technology standpoint, right? And you kind of see a lot of that stuff Apple's really kind of honed in on, right? Hey, I hold this down and then I move it around, and it just works, right? And so I think that's one of these things that we want to try to make sure that we're kind of have an eye on, is that it's just making sure things aren't clunky from an interoperability standpoint, and that we're having an eye on that these things integrate, rather than just having some bells and whistles that go kind of across a specific area, and then you have to drop out and then essentially going into a completely different environment to actually continue your work.
If the users don't like what you've given them, they will figure out ways around it. I think it's true with cybersecurity. I think it's true with help desks. I think it's true with so many things. And it's interesting it's taken so long for not just agencies, but industry more generally to really understand that you just can't throw technology over the transom and say, this is it, tough.
Yeah.
It's been a big culture change for I think anyone in the IT world. Are you sharing your experiences more broadly across the FDA? Are you meeting with others in the customer experience world, or other program offices, or other parts of the CIO's office, even to say, hey, here's our experience, here's how we can share with you to make you all better and make everybody better?
Yeah, so a couple things with that, right? We're looking at, we collaborate now with a lot of the other, agencies within HHS, and I imagine that'll certainly become maybe more broadly after, we deal with some of those things. But one of the things that I think is really amazing is we have one of the most amazing cybersecurity programs in the government. It's really fantastic. And talking with our CISO, he's actually made user experience as one of the main areas for cybersecurity, which is not something, and it goes to what you said, is if it's not easy to use, right, and if it stops me from doing my work, I'm going to find ways around it, because my work is the most important thing. And so I think it's a pretty big success to say, like, an important compliance program is looking at that to make it as easy as possible for people to really run through and get the job done. And so I'm really excited that we're partnering with them and making great things happen.
That is culture change, because your CISO has actually come, whether he's come to you or she's come to you or you've come to them, it doesn't matter. The fact is they're receptive to it, and they're not just saying, yeah, Josh, that'd be nice, but what if we get hacked, or what if this happens, or what if that happens? And And I think that that's a measuring of risk and balancing out risk. We talked a lot about customer experience. We talked a lot about the IT kiosk. Josh, I just before I let you go, are there other things on your priority list? Are there other things you're looking to get done over the next 6 or 9 months? Again, whether in this world of IT kiosk, customer experience, or even just more broadly, what else are you working on?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm actually really excited / interested in is this hybrid meeting experience, right? I feel like it's this little bit of a coined term because we've done this way before, and now all of a sudden it's there. But what it actually is because you talk about culture change. The way that we interact on these digital platforms has changed. It's fundamentally changed. People, didn't always use video. They didn't, use chat. There's other features and capabilities within these platforms that people are really heavily using now. And now all of a sudden you go into a space and you start working with people and you're like, wait, I don't have that anymore. So how do you now all of a sudden bridge that digital capability with a physical space and provide meeting equity across all these different areas? And so, it's definitely an area that's changing incredibly rapidly. But also, we need to kind of put our foot forward and try to figure out how to actually make that work out, because previously while we had it, it just wasn't used well. So at least in our circumstance. So.
And that's one of the most interesting things that's happening. If you've had a chance to tour the GSA Workplace Innovation Lab, this is something that they've launched in about a month and a half, 2 months ago. They actually, and they took the media through it, of course, because we're special. And they gave us the tour. And one of the things they showed us was they have cameras that move. So it's not like you're looking down on people or looking up at people. That everything becomes eye level and adjusts to where your seat is and how you work. And I thought that was one of the most interesting things, because they're trying to get back around to this equity and accessibility issue. So no one feels like, well, I'm working from home and Josh and 4 others, people are in there, and I don't feel like I'm a part of the conversation. So I think that's, if you haven't checked it out, I would just offer you should probably check it out.
I think next month we're scheduled to see it. So that's awesome. Yeah.
I was told that they have a pretty big backlog. Josh, I very much enjoyed our conversation, and unfortunately, though, we are out of time for today. So I'm going to thank my guest. Josh Lehman is the director of the Office of Business and Customer Assurance within the Office of Digital Transformation at the Food and Drug Administration. Josh, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more from the CX Exchange.